Welcome back to another edition of the Friday Golf Podcast. I am your host, Andy Johnson, and today I am joined by Bob Crosby. Bob is the chairman of the USGA Museum Committee, which encompasses museums at Liberty Corner and Pinehurst and its archive and library. Bob is also one of my favorite golf course architecture minds to have a discussion with. So it's super fun anytime you get to talk to Bob. I'm so happy he joined. He kind of comes at golf architecture a little bit different way than I do. He's very history based, and it was super fun to have a chat with him. Before we get to that, I got to say thank you to everybody listening. Today is Monday the 9th when I'm recording this. We turned 9, so 9 years of Friday Golf today. It's been quite the journey, and we turned an idea into a full-fledged company at this point with staff and everything, and I wouldn't be able to do this without all of your support. It's been an incredible ride. Every December, I start to think like I never can remember the exact date that we send our first newsletter out, and I always end up searching it, but I always think about, 9 years ago before I was in golf and life then, and I'm living out a dream, and I want to thank everybody that listens and who's supported this podcast and the newsletter and our membership through the years. It's what's allowed us to continue to grow, continue to, I hope, provide better and better content over the years, and I'm really thankful for all of your support and making this little idea that was crazy, and I was so naive when I started the company. I had no clue what I was really getting into, and the only reason it worked is because people read and people listened, and a lot of people helped. I mean, a ton of people helped along the way. It would have been impossible to do this without the help of a lot of talented people through the years, in help from just a conversation, help from a note saying that they like their stuff, they like reading the website when not a lot of people were reading. All of that stuff is what's allowed this thing to keep going, and I'm super excited about the future and where we're going to continue to push this thing. So I really, really appreciate all of your help. And this time of year between Thanksgiving and Christmas, I always find myself thinking about all the people that have helped me along the way. It's a huge, long list, and I want to thank everybody that listens. So let's get to Bob and our conversation. But first, let's talk about Club Champion. They are our club fitting partner, and I've been working with Club Champion since like high school. I was one of their first customers when it was an operation out of a garage. Now they have grown into, I would say, the world's premier club fitting operation. They have studios all over the country, 120 nationwide. When you go into Club Champion, I think my favorite thing about it is that you're going to get the best club and shaft combination for you. They have basically every type of shaft, every type of club that you could, new club that you could hit, and they're going to put together the best club for you. This is not just a brand play. Go in there and say, I want to find the best club for me, and they're going to do that. They have highly trained master fitters that guide you along the way, and they use top technology like TrackMan. So if you are interested in getting a Club Champion fitting, go to clubchampion.com, use the promo code FRIEDEGG, and that will get you a $100 full bag fitting or $50 for any other fitting type with a club purchase. That's promo code FRIEDEGG. All right, thanks. Let's get to Bob Crosby. All right, Bob, I'm really excited. You usually talk with Garrett, but I stole you for this episode. You're one of the people that I enjoy talking golf with very, very much. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about golf architecture, what's happening now, and also how it fits in the larger context of the history of golf architecture. So I gave you an assignment here to come up with some 3 points of interest and 1 point of maybe I don't really love where this is going, and I did the same on my end. So I'd love to hear, with golf course architecture, where we're at today. What's one of the things that you're thinking about?
Well, let me just begin with a disclaimer. I don't pretend, and in fact, I have not seen as many of the newer courses as you have, so I am pleased to defer to you on a lot of that. I do come to this as a historian. While you're doing fancy tours of golf courses in your long black limousines, staying at fancy 4-star hotels, I'm plugging away in old issues of Golf Illustrated in the bowels of golf libraries. So
you got that exactly right. That's how I move around the world.
Yeah, if I sound resentful, it's because I am. But I come at the more modern stuff from that sort of historian's perspective. And I think, Andy, we are at a major turning point in golf architecture right now. And I think that major turning point can be described as what comes next after minimalism. Coore, Crenshaw, Doak have dominated, I think, the field for the last 25, 30 years. Their calling card has been a minimalist approach to golf architecture. I love it. You love it. We all love it. How does the next generation distinguish itself? Doak has talked about how early in his career that was very important to him. He decided at High Point and some of his other earlier courses to completely reject the idea of building mounds the way Reese and his father had done on so many courses. He rejected a lot of Pete Dye's pots and his sleepers for a different approach to golf architecture, all in the name, I think, of him trying to distinguish himself from his predecessors. That's, I think, the struggle right now that the next generation is dealing with. The Brian Schneiders, the Blake Conants, the David Zinkins, the Rob Collins. I'm leaving many out, I'm sure, but they are trying to distinguish themselves from what has been an incredibly successful run of golf architecture, perhaps even a timeless one. But so there is a natural instinct for them to say, "Hey, look at this! Look what I just did." There's that book of famous last lines of "Here, hold my beer, watch this." There's that aspect to some of their newer courses, and I take it that some of that is just an attempt to find their own feet in the discipline. I think some of it is over the top. I think some of it is absolutely wonderful, but they're trying to strike out in a new direction, and I don't think anybody is trying, or anybody that we respect is trying to out minimalize or minimize the Doaks and the Coore Crenshaws. They're trying to find a different path, and I think that's very exciting. I think there are going to be some successes. There are going to be some failures, but I think it's an exciting moment.
Yeah, I think obviously this moment. I don't think we expected to have this many new golf courses being built on an annual basis. I mean, if you start to think about like where we were 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it was a handful. You could count them on two hands. New golf courses being built per year, and I think like we're at this, as you kind of illustrated, and this is. This fits into like kind of one of my larger points is that we are now getting the opportunity to see fresh blood in golf architecture. There was I think like a lot of people that are very into golf course architecture, new golf courses, were asking for this 6 years ago, but the reality was there just aren't enough new builds for that to be the case, because if there's only 8 golf courses being built, a couple are going to go to Fazio. But then for the other ones, it's like, why wouldn't I hire Tom Doak, Bill Coore, or Gil Hanse, right? Like, I'm not going to take the risk on this $20 million investment and hire somebody new. But now we're seeing those guys, the big names. And I think like one of the things that I think is interesting is I think that the first people called are now Tom Doak, Bill Coore, and Ben Crenshaw, and Gil Hanse. I think that is a seismic shift in golf architecture. They are the clear kind of across the board people, the bona fide number one golf architects. And I don't think that was the case 10 years ago. But now, because of the influx of builds, there is this huge opportunity. There's a huge opportunity to identify, to begin for architects to begin to showcase what they can do and maybe where golf architecture is going. And I think that is a very interesting topic, because you see different things. Like, I think Brian Schneider's a really interesting example of this, where he has introduced he's building golf courses in a minimal fashion, from the sense of, he's attempting to use the land. He's not just blowing up, a piece of property and re-engineering everything about it. He's attempting to use the land, but he is creating a lot of very clearly man-made features, mounding, greens that are pushed up. They do not look like they were just sitting there but they do, that is a different style, right? You obviously have Rob Collins and Tad King, who I think have made a name for themselves for blowing up properties, moving earth. And I think like one of the things that they probably would push back on is, we've never been afforded a site that's good enough to not blow up and push dirt around.
There's also just the theoretical problem that the younger generation face, which is you can't out minimalize a minimalist.
Well, I think you could. I think we haven't seen somebody go like completely like, you know what, I'm not doing anything.
But that becomes a driving range. At some point, it just becomes a place where you hit balls into an open space, and that's a very hard row to hoe for the younger generation. I mean, but the other thing that I think, and I agree with you entirely, the go-to guys are the sort of the 3 key guys who all come out of the quote minimalist school. They may debate that, but I think they by and large do. The issue facing the golf industry, and it is huge right now, is that group of golfers, Gil's maybe a little bit younger, but Coore is pushing 80.
Mm-hmm.
Doak is already talking about slowing down in his early 60s. I've always thought Hansen's a bit of a hybrid, but he's young, a bit younger. But they are truly aging out at this point, and whether they like it or not, in the next 10 years, maybe 5 years, they're going to be doing a lot less work, and because they want to do less work. But and that's where the new generation slides in, because there's the demand, I think, is going to be there, and they're the ones that are going to have to fill it. So
I think, and I think this ties in to one of my other topics that I had here, and I kind of wrote down some names. This is, to me, some fresh blood in golf architecture with less than 5 original designs to their name that are kind of popping up. You've got Ogilvy, Cocking, and Mead, the Australian firm. Their big opening this year was the Medina 3 renovation. They have some new builds on the way. They have the ones at Fall Line. 36 holes near you, as well as some other ones coming on board online in the near future. You have Kyle Franz, who did the redesign at Cabot, also was part co-designer of Broomsedge. You've got the Love Sherman combination, which I think is like a diametrically different kind of firm than than some of these other ones where they come. It's the PGA Tour player and then kind of out of a big design firm partnership that we saw very much, prolific in the 90s and 80s. Not as popular in this era, but I think they're a lot different than the Nicholas companies, or Arnold Palmer Design. You've got Rob Collins and Tad King. You've got Brian Schneider. Tyler Ray is starting to get some new design work. He's been doing restoration work for a number of years now and is certainly in that young up-and-coming bucket. Kai Golby is building a new course and obviously was heavily involved with Tree Farm. Andrew Green got his first new build. He's been obviously like a huge force in the renovation restoration world. And then I've got Jackson Kahn on here, which is like kind of like the next iteration to me of the Fazio school. And I played their Scottsdale National. It's completely it is so diametrically different than minimalism. Like as far away from minimalism as you can get, but I thought it was fantastic.
And I think that's the direction most of these guys are going to go in. To distinguish them, they have to distinguish themselves, or their careers are going to be very short-lived. Let's recall, this is the historian in me speaking, that at the outset of the strategic golf architecture, early on, say pre-World War I, McKenzie, Colt, and Simpson were designing wild, radical features on golf courses. The examples, the Sitwell Park greens, the famous pictures of those greens that McKenzie did. McKenzie's some of his designs for Cypress Point are crazy. The Headingley greens that Colt did were wild. I mean, the fangs have been taken out of almost all of them since. The St. George's Hill, the famous 8th green, the par 3 St. George's Hill that Colt designed, these were crazy, crazy greens. And I think that was in part trying to find their feet in a new kind of discipline. They were pushing the envelope to distinguish themselves at the time, I think, largely from Victorian golf architecture. This is a whole different ballgame now, but there is that temptation. And I think some of the newer guys are doing some of that more bold, dare I say, radical sorts of features for that reason.
I've got a couple thoughts on this. And I think that your general inclination when you're a young architect is to build bold because it is a opportunity. You've worked and young architect is interesting because young architect in golf is 40-year-old, right?
Right.
So
right.
You're
or
talking about
right.
You're talking about a professional career where you have worked for other people for, at a minimum, usually 15 years without being able to express your ideas. So when you get these early opportunities, it is the natural, it's like, let me show you what I've been thinking about for
hey, watch this.
15, 20 years. I don't think there are many professions like that where your ideas, sure, you have some individual ability to do things on a project, right? Sure, you might be the lead associate on a project, but at the end of the day, you are not putting everything out there. On a recent Yoke with Doak, Tom talked about told a really great story about Riverdale Dunes, a course in Denver that he worked on with Perry Dye. And he said Perry had a coinciding project that paid more money in Denver. So he had two projects in Denver, and he said to Tom, just go build cool stuff at Riverdale Dunes. Like, go crazy out there. And he said that Perry came out, the first visit he came out, he was like, this is it? Like, this is, I told you to go crazy.
Right.
And like Tom was like, yeah, I was like a little worried about like what I was doing, because like at the end of the day, your name's not on it, so like you're gonna hold back.
Right.
And then from there he went nuts, you know, and
right.
he built some really wild stuff. And so I think like when your natural inclination when you're a young golf architect is you're going to say, look at me. But like part of what I always think about, and like this is like so true at a place like Brambles, for example, where they went, I mean, super minimal, some pretty wild greens, but there are some occasions where you look at some of these holes and you're like, God, like, how did he know? How did Bill know that this was going to be enough? Like, to me, it's way harder to know when you have just enough that it's not going to be dull and boring, but you have just enough features in a hole that it's really a wonderful, gentle hole to play.
The supreme talent in golf architecture, and only very, very few people have it, is how to play the restraint card.
Yes.
That's hard to do because it takes extraordinary amounts of courage not to build a bunker there or not to build a mound over there. Just leave it alone. That's hard. That takes guts. It's like silent parts of Mozart symphonies. It takes guts just to have nothing going on for a moment. And yeah, I agree entirely.
My other thought on what you said about the wildness is, I think one of the things, and this was probably the case, you could tell me if I'm right or wrong, in the 20s, or, I think roughly that's the period of time you're talking about here, 1910s, 1920s. But I think like one of the things that's not talked about enough is how modern agronomy practices have limited the amount of ability for architects to innovate, to do things differently, because the playing surfaces are just so fast now that the slopes that you can use in the fairway and on the greens and around the greens are just less. You don't have as much room to play with because of how fast our playing surfaces and how well maintained our playing surfaces are now. Like I'll never forget the old course at the Open, the last Open they held. The fairways were amazing. They were fast and firm, but I looked at it and it's like, well, every ball goes to the bottom of these really amazing contours. They go to the low spots. So the contours aren't even working the way they should.
Yeah. There are a couple of, I agree with that. There are a couple of, along the same lines. I guess my response to that is, well, you can always just not cut the grass so low. But
that's not what the consumers demanding.
That's not what the consumers demand. Although
that's what they think they're demanding. I think that's the thing.
Although at some point putting off greens starts to become tiresome, but
for some people,
for me in particular. But
I think both of us think that way. But then I hear people they'll tell me it was awesome. I putted off 4 greens. I'm like, wait, what's awesome about that?
But let me talk, because I was thinking about this last night. Let me talk about 2 lost threads that I think the younger generation, whether they know it or not, are sort of picking up on. And one is the original Augusta National from 1934, Mackenzie's original course. I have always thought, and I've had this off-the-wall theory, that Augusta in 1934 was strategic golf architecture on acid, on LSD. It was crazy shit. It had relatively few bunkers, lots of contouring, and just wild greens. I think Mackenzie had hoped, and this is sort of towards the end of his career, that he would take strategic golf architecture in a new direction. One that would have boomerang greens, all sorts of crazy stuff. It turned out that the Great Depression and World War II interceded. Nobody had any money for new golf courses until almost 1960 or so. By then, all the Golden Age greats were gone. Certainly Mackenzie dies, I think, in 34. So golf architecture really at that point sort of started over with Robert Trent Jones Jr. and that sort of thing. But Mackenzie was suggesting, I think, at Augusta something that, and because he did it at Augusta, he had an owner, Bob Jones, who understood him. I think he was trying to push architecture to a place it hadn't been before. And it turned out, because of other historical events, it never happened. I think the younger generation is sort of going down that same road. Let's take things to a different place. And I hope they do. I hope, but I'll stop in a second. The other lost thread that nobody has picked up, or at least I take that back. I'll give you a caveat in a minute. The other lost thread is Pinehurst U.S. Open 2014. Single line of irrigation. They let instead of growing rough, they just let the natural vegetation grow. Much of it is sandy. The idea, and God bless Mike, what's his name? The USG head,
Mike
Davis, who wanted that to be a model for how golf courses were going to be built in the future, because they are easier to build and a hell of a lot cheaper to maintain. It didn't happen. I mean, domestic, everyday golfers didn't like under-maintained golf courses like that.
You know who didn't like it? Donald Trump didn't like it.
Absolutely.
He tweeted about it.
Although Doak's Pinehurst number 10 has got some of that. The roughs are not really rough so much as just unmaintained areas.
Yeah.
But that's another lost thread that I think, knowingly or not, the younger generation is sort of picking up on. And that may give us a hint of where things end up going. But both Mackenzie and Augusta in 1934, a lost opportunity, it seems to me, and the Open 2014 at Pinehurst were all suggesting there's a different way to do stuff. And maybe somebody ought to pick up on that.
There's a lot of directions to go on your two comments here. And I think like one of the things that I dislike the most about the golf industry right now is the chase that is currently happening on the agronomy side. And I think like what you hit on with Pinehurst number 2 is a great example. The chase for perfect on the agronomy side.
Right.
I don't think anybody, if you said there's a scale of 100% of your potential on the agronomy side, I think like a lot of people are chasing that 100%.
Mm-hmm. Because they can.
The amount of money that it costs to get to 75% is, let's just call it $1 million, depending on your property. The amount of money to go from 75 to 90, let's just call it, is 700,000. So you're all of a sudden, and these are just rough numbers. I'm not an agronomist. Every property is different. Everybody's systems are different. So you're talking about, okay, it's $1 million to get me to 75, and it's 700,000 for 15%. To go from 90 to 95 is like another $1 million.
Right.
And then, to go the next 5%, depending on your property and how crazy your membership is, how crazy your greens chairman is, is like another $1 million or $2 million.
Right.
And you see these maintenance budgets just pushing up. And it's like, what are we? No golfer knows the difference between 90 and 100. Very few golfers care about the difference between 75 and 90. And at the end of the day, all these costs get pushed back to the game and the individuals that play the game. And like, you know what? Like, you can say, oh, like it's my club. This is the way we do things. Like, who wants $2,000 a month dues? Does anybody want that? But that's where we're going. That's where where like, you know, why are neighborhood clubs like that are like just they're Doak fives? Why are the dues on these clubs over $1,000? Like it's crazy to me where this is going, and where it reflects also is like there are clubs now with guest fees. Like if I'm a member and I spend, you know, a couple $100,000 on my initiation, I'm spending thousands of dollars every month. When I want to bring a guest out, which is like part of like being a member, like sharing your course is, it's $400 to bring a guest out, plus caddies,
you're
plus
not going to do
lunch.
it.
It's just like, oh, what? Like, and obviously, like a lot of people in this case, like maybe this isn't a consequential sum of money, but to me, that's just the wrong direction for the game of golf.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. And having been a green chairman at a large Atlanta metro area golf course, they have unlimited capital resources.
Yes.
They don't care. They just don't care. You know, you see it at every level in terms of the Toro machines they buy, in terms of the money poured into agronomy, including the number of staff they have to maintain the golf course. It's just, they don't really, it's just whatever you need. It's just whatever you need. It's an amazing business, private clubs, particularly large, successful ones. It's an amazing business. But let me, there's an underbelly to that, which I think is absolutely fascinating. And this gets back to my new generation thesis, which is that there are a lot of people your age who travel in these informal packs to play these good, solid public courses to hang out. They aren't they aren't maintained to the nth degree, but they enjoy being with each other. They enjoy the golf courses. And that ranges from, at the high end, the Bandon Dunes types to Mike Young's The Field.
Well, the Bandon Dunes, the greens are maybe 10s. That's what I don't understand. Right. Everybody goes to Bandon Dunes. Everybody goes to Scotland. Everybody goes to Ireland. And is like, oh, these are... The golf there is just so amazing. It's the best golf. It's the best golf. All those places, for the most part, outside of like outside of the tourist traps in the UK, their maintenance budgets are fractions,
right,
of the American Country Club,
right.
And these, that's what I don't get. I don't understand how there's no corollary here,
right. I don't either. Other than you can do it, so do it. That's you know, if you can stimp your greens at 12 or 13 on a daily basis, do it. Here's the money, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's nuts. It's totally nuts. But the other phenomenon, and I think, you know, this is the younger generation, is that there is a cohort of younger golfers, people in their late 30s, early 40s, maybe, who are just not buying the private club model, who would rather get in a car or an airplane and travel to play these golf courses that are not so impeccably maintained, in part because of the camaraderie, but I think in part because of the golf courses themselves. And I wonder if that isn't an early warning shot at the private club model, that leading the thought leaders of your generation, I don't know how old you are, but I'm guessing around 40, the thought leaders of that generation are heading in a different direction. I find that encouraging.
I think that this was absolutely playing out. And this was playing out in the late 2010s. And then COVID completely changed this movement. To me, one of my longstanding beliefs is that no private club realized this, but the Kaisers completely threw a wrench in their business model.
Right.
The Kaisers were, unbeknownst to private clubs, the Kaisers effectively were killing the local private club, because people of my age, pre-COVID, were looking at the role of the modern parent has completely changed. I am a modern parent. I'm sure some listeners will say, well, like you're just soft. But if I look at my wife on a weekend and say, I'm going to go play golf at 11 a.m. or 10 a.m. or 9 a.m., she looks at me like, you're going to work all week and then you're just going to not be here with your kid. It's easier for me to play golf on a Tuesday morning than it is to play on a Saturday morning.
Absolutely,
at this point.
Yeah,
and this is not me alone. This is the modern household with kids. So the reason that country clubs work, and this is where it's completely flipped if you listen to old episodes of this podcast versus now. The only way I'm going to play golf is if there's a pool, right, involved. And it can be like, bring the kid to the pool at 11 and I will be there at noon, and I will just play with the kid all afternoon and you can just sit at the pool, right? Like that is how it works. But the Kaisers, people were looking at it, and there was this, people were staying in the city longer. So there were more younger adults staying in the city longer. Apartments in the city and in modern buildings in the city, there are more pool options in the city than ever. Less people wanted to travel out to the suburbs. And what happened? COVID hit, and everybody's like, "Oh, I like green space. I like having my own space." Right. And this completely reversed this. But people were looking at the Kaisers, at the Ballyneals, at the Prairie Dunes, it's like, I could spend $1,000 a month and have a big initiation fee and join here, or I could do 2 or 3 of these cool trips a year, play a few rounds of public golf, and that satisfies my golf itch, even if I'm a diehard golfer.
Right.
And I think
Sweetens Cove is Exhibit A1 for that.
Exactly. And I think that was the trend that really, if you're a historian, seismic events completely change the direction of things that are happening. And I think the local club model was on the verge of being in a very, very, very bad spot until COVID hit. And that completely changed the whole way society viewed the suburbs and the whole way the younger generation thought of the local club. And it completely has changed the golf world and the golf business.
Well, I think it will. I'm still in touch with my club here in Atlanta, and they still have a wait list.
Mm-hmm.
And
did they have a wait list in 2018?
Yes, but I'll tell you where they didn't have a wait list, and maybe you don't remember this, but the real estate Wall Street crash in 2008 and 9 wiped out everybody's wait list. In fact, we were a lot of members resigned or were booted out for failure to pay dues. By 2018, that had recovered, and there was a wait list back then. And COVID, things just accelerated. To everybody's surprise, things accelerated during COVID. I mean, you wanted to get out in the golf course, but getting back real quick to Bandon, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I think Kaiser's genius, and I mean the word genius in its full sense of the word, was to develop golf courses that appeal to everybody, the golf architecture nutcases like you and me, but also to wives who wanted to come out and play golf. It's extraordinary to put together a set of golf courses that appeals to both. And I've done it. My wife loved it. I loved it. And Doak has mentioned it in the past that Kaiser has a knack for walking that tightrope, and it's not easy.
I think this goes to one of the topics that I probably harp on as much as possible, but I think the Kaiser's the other genius. And obviously they have some leverage. They're building golf courses for cheaper than everybody else, and they're proving that great golf architecture does not cost more than shitty golf architecture. In fact, over time, great golf architecture costs way less than shitty golf architecture.
And they're also proving something that I hate to sound condescending, but that the everyday golfer has never really quite understood until maybe recently. And that is that a really great golf course doesn't have to be a hard golf course.
Yes.
And Augusta National is a great example of that. But also Bandon. I mean, Bandon won't beat you up if you don't let it. I mean, you don't have to play that well to enjoy Bandon. It's a classic course of where if you want to play for score aggressively, it might beat you up. But if you want to just play your game, it's fine. And Kaiser understands that.
All right, let's take a quick break from Bob and let's talk about our partner Launchbox by True Golf. If you're into golf architecture, Launchbox is a great product because you can play some of the best golf courses in the world virtually. Launchbox is a portable launch monitor and golf simulator. And it has a simple setup, instant shot registration, has a lot of measured data, and an easy Wi-Fi connection. Now, it's winter. It's cold a lot of places. I saw there are a lot of places the weather turned bad. I'm sorry for those places, but you could use Launchbox indoors and set up a great indoor golf setup for yourself. You can use it also outdoors off a mat. So if you're interested in getting a launch monitor that's great, that has great golf course play, Launchbox might be for you. Go to truegolf.com. That's TRUGOLF.com/egg. And you can learn more. That's truegolf.com/egg. All right, let's get back to Bob Crosby. Going back to your Augusta National topic and the idea of Mackenzie, that kind of getting into the mid-30s where golf architecture was going, I think you could probably put it in the bucket of like the start of the 30s where golf architecture was going, that was halted by two massive events, the Depression and World War II. You talk about an art form, a practice, a really a new industry that was evolving, and new ideas were being shared, and it was getting more sophisticated and more professional. If you think about like the whole practice, like there weren't professional golf architects until like basically the 1910s, and
right. It was a whole new profession.
Exactly. So you have 20 years of a profession, and then it gets wiped out for effectively 25 years because of a couple massive world events, and that exchange of ideas, the natural evolution of it is halted, and everything starts fresh with a whole new set of technology for doing the job. I think like there were other schools emerging at this point also, beyond the Mackenzie Augusta National. There was also like one of Mackenzie's associates, Perry Maxwell, wrote very harshly about the use of steam shovels. And I think this was directly a shot at Charles Banks and Langford Moreau, who came from a different school than Mackenzie. It was kind of more the Rayner McDonald mold of building golf courses, but they were evolving. they were building bigger and bigger things. There was still they weren't altering landscapes, but they were constructing large features. And that is another with heavy machinery. And it was rudimentary heavy machinery to what came out of like 1960 when the bulldozer technology got to a point where it's like, we can literally just flatten a fairway if we want, and we can make this flat.
Well,
and that's
we can road grade the whole place.
And that's where golf architecture lost its way.
Right.
But that other school of not minimalism, where like, the greens were wild at Augusta National, but the general thought with the bunkers and allowing the land to really be the star was this idea of minimalism. But on the other end of the coin, you had this golden age maximalism movement that was also evolving and changing. And then that was halted. And I wonder right now, are we at a similar point in golf architecture where we have, if you look at it, you have like disciples with Jackson Kahn of the Fazio, we can move the world, and we can create any landscape that you want. You also have the disciples of the Doak, Coore, Crenshaw, Gil Hands movement of minimalism, where you have their younger associates that might push different directions and offshoots from that school.
I think you're right. I think we're at a pivot point. I don't think any of us sitting here today know where that pivot is going to go. I think there's some hints, but I don't know that the route has been set out, and we can, with any sort of reliability, predict where things are going to go. But it is absolutely a pivot point. I'm kind of looking for, I hope I live long enough to see where it ends up. One of the things I hope this younger generation of architects pick up on, and I see very little evidence for it, is there's just a rich treasure trove of ideas in the history of golf architecture if they want to go back and dig through it. And I hope they do. It doesn't mean overturning fundamental principles, but there's just an awful lot of ideas out there that are lying on the ground for somebody to pick up. Which leads me to another topic I wanted to touch on real quickly, and one of the things I am disappointed in this is, I guess we put this in the disappointed bucket, is compared to the teens and 1920s, writing about golf architecture is impoverished, particularly by architects themselves. And Tom Doak is a clear exception to that. He was a brilliant writer and would stand, on an equal footing with some of the best writers of the teens and 1920s. But he's the only one. I mean, there is no other architect and relatively few other people writing about golf architecture. And by that, I mean, not just about the aesthetics of the course, the look of the bunkers, how nice the clubhouse is, how smooth the turf is, but actually writing about structure, about the architectural structure of a hole. I mean, why is this bunker here and not there? But why is this bunker here at all? Those are the kinds of questions people argued about and agonized over page after page, and I love it, in the 1920s. Simpson, Colt, Lowe, John Lowe, all these guys were battling back and forth about the rationale for putting a bunker here and not there. That sort of discussion doesn't take place. And I think one of the reasons is because the whole golf course rankings and ratings thing has just swallowed it up.
Yeah.
It has taken so much oxygen out of the room that there's almost no place left to talk about anything else other than whether Old Barnwell should be 51st in the ranking or 53rd. I mean, should it be
so silly?
Should it be ahead of High Hampton or below High? It's ridiculous. I think, and God bless Doak. He says it's all subjective anyway. So what the hell? But the focus on where my course ranks is a topic that everybody's eager to argue about, rather than the inherent features of the course. And do they work? Do they not work? Why, if they do work, why do they work? There is so little writing about that. And that was the main fare of writing on golf architecture in the 1920s. And it just doesn't exist right now. And I blame part of that on the main magazines, beginning in, say, the 80s and 90s, where they did a lot of rankings, and their golf architecture writers, like Ron Whitten and others, really fairly quickly on began talking about basically in terms of rankings, and not so much any direct discussions of golf architecture itself.
Well, the rankings have become, this gets back to the club business. The rankings have become big business for all clubs.
Oh, absolutely.
The rankings are huge business for the clubs in Great Britain and Ireland.
Right.
They are huge. It's huge business for clubs in America. I visited, I think like Interlaken and Medina, they both had different reasons why they did their, $20 million renovations this year. But I think without a doubt, one of the reasons was they saw their course falling in rankings, and they know that leads to more members, maybe higher initiation, maybe more guests wanting to play there, more Monday outings, more like you go down the line of all the things that a higher ranking does, and it's big business now. And I agree completely. Like it's an overall trend of like, there's less nuance than ever with the way people discuss things online.
Right.
Online it's almost making it a race to the bottom. It's commoditized the ability to publish written word.
Well,
one of
the I agree. One of the problems is the ASGCA prohibits its members from criticizing other members. So God bless Tom Doak for not joining the ASGCA, because he'll criticize other architects. But
I think that's become the general practice. Is like young architects, they don't think they should say anything.
Right.
But if you look at Tom, I think like what's interesting is like, I think like every architect that, for the most part, the developer that hires them is going to be it's like a personality match almost. Like, right? Like there are clients that profile for Gil. There are clients that profile for Tom. There are clients that profile for Bill. And they're like all across the spectrum. They have different personalities, and they kind of like fit into those buckets, right?
Right.
Like, but like a Tom Doak, somebody that hires Tom Doak, I think for the most part, and this is not speaking, this is speaking in generalities. There's always exceptions to this. Somebody that hires Tom Doak is going to be a complete golf nut, like golf tragic to the nth degree. They're going to have listened to all the podcasts that he's been on. They're going to read his writing. They are going to be so in the golf bucket, because that is what his, like, you can tell the guy just loves golf. He thinks about golf all the time. And that shows in like how much time he devotes to writing about golf, and
right.
beyond what he's doing. Like, that's what occupies his brain.
Right. And anybody that hires Tom will have to know enough about golf architecture not to be intimidated by Tom.
Yes.
And because Tom can be intimidating.
Yeah.
But I agree, it's sort of self-selecting. But I think the price for the emphasis on rankings, ratings, whatever the word is, the price for that is the absence of good writing on golf architecture. It really has taken over commentary on the game, or at least architecture of the game. And
it's kind of we've got our membership that we write extensively about golf architecture,
right?
And I think one of the things that we wanted to avoid was the idea of rating golf courses in a 1 through 100 fashion, because as you said, it's so silly. Like, is Sandhills number 6 or number 10 or number 4? It's well, what day of the week is it? I could change my mind about whether something's 3 or 4 or 122, or it gets even sillier when you get to like 122 or 125. Like you're talking about like literal, and with the way the ratings go is like literal like individuals who might have shot their worst score ever or their best score ever at a golf course will change whether it's 110 or 106.
It is beyond absurd, and I actually did a history of ranking golf courses that goes back to 1898, 1901. But anyway, but we're running out of time, and I wanted to touch on one other subject.
All right, let's go.
If I could. And this gets back. I'm trying to drive home the new generation theme, and this is my last shot at it. We talked a minute ago about how many of this younger generation is working on restorations of existing golf courses. And I think that's wonderful. It's a source of income. It gives them a great deal of experience. But an experience only in one aspect of golf architecture, and that is an experience of doing everything but a routing.
Yeah.
And if there's a critical part of being a talented golf architect, it's being a great router. And if you can combine that with a sense of aesthetics, with sort of a skill of landscaping, you've got the whole ball of wax. And there aren't many people who have all of those component parts. And the geyser of work for clubs are all coming up on their centenaries at this point. They all want to spruce up their golf courses.
They're all getting in line to spend 15 to 25 million.
It's unbelievable. And they're sucking up the time of all this younger generation of architects. But none of that, or very, very little of that, requires routing skills.
Which is, as you illuminated, I think probably the most important aspect of building a golf course, and probably the one that requires the most practice.
Bingo. And it involves not just an aesthetic sense of I can lay out a pretty hole. It involves some engineering. You've got issues with drainage, road route, locating clubhouse, all sorts of things.
It's problem solving at the highest degree in the profession.
It's the high, and it requires an ability to read topos. All sorts of skills that you don't normally associate with the look of a golf course, but it's at the bone. It is the bones of a golf course. I mean, if you want to criticize somebody's routing, it's like criticizing a William Faulkner novel and saying, "I wish you'd written a different book." Routing is so deeply embedded in any golf course. It's hard to discern what the decisions were at the outset. And so my point here is that
here's the thing. If you criticize someone's routing, they say you didn't understand all the constraints. That's an immediate comeback.
Well, I know.
Always.
I know.
You didn't understand all the constraints. But I completely agree. Like a really well thought out routing. Like I think like one of the coolest things that I saw, and I think like a golf course that I almost brought up in when you were talking about 1934 Augusta National. I think the Tree Farm is a great example of a golf course that's pushing in a very different direction than its neighbor Old Barnwell, right? Like it is restraint. It is a beacon of restraint. Let's let the golf ground. And I think it's like, that is a fantastic golf course. And there are a couple, and people are going to show me a picture of one hole and say, this isn't restrained. But for the most part, the golf course is really a study in restraint and allowing the land to be the natural hazard throughout. But it was fascinating. I'm friends with Zach. I saw countless routings on that property from Zach. And he hired Tom Doak to do the routing. Tom came in, and the biggest difference in the routing was Zach was consistently going over hills. It would have been an exhausting golf course to play. It would have been dramatic. It would have been, there would have been shots and holes that you would never forget. But one of the things, Zach would, I think, be very, very open about this. One of the things he said is like, listen, like, I didn't think about how to like use side hills and how to navigate a property along the edges and use the hills and kind of traverse them on the side. I was just going over all of them. And this is like a perfect example of someone who's routed, when you think about like projects that didn't happen, he's probably routed 70 golf courses, 80 golf courses.
I'd say more than that. Yeah.
120.
Yeah.
Versus somebody that was trying to route a golf course for the first time.
Right.
And that's like the thing about the profession. And I think you hit the nail on the head. That's so hard is like, how do you get good at routing without any opportunity to route?
Right. Right. Now, there is, to my mind, a trade-off between routing and landscaping. The better the routing, the less need for landscaping.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the tree farm may be an example of that. I think Zach probably was paying deference to Tom and his routing by his restraint. That's a secret vote of confidence to Tom's routing. I think if you in too many cases, sort of a B- routing requires an A+ landscaping job, or vice versa. And I don't have the
yeah. Well, I think one of the things that you're hitting on too is a great routing on an above average property or better. Above average or better.
Right.
If you have a great routing there, you have very minimal disturbance to the greater mature landscape, because this land's been sitting there. There's mature plant flora and fauna. You have less of a disturbance to that mature landscape because you don't have to do mass earthwork. And mass earthwork, when you want to regrade a fairway, that extends for 50 yards into out of play areas because you have to tie it in. And when you do that, you remove all the vegetation. So that's why new courses often look really new.
Right.
And I think that's like something that I was so amazed by Sedge Valley at Sand Valley, was like how beautiful the golf course is in the first year, because there was very little disturbance to the native vegetation.
That's the main claim of minimalism. It's just, I'm going to leave micro contours, natural vegetation to the extent I possibly can, so that when the course opens, it looks like it's been there for 3 or 4 decades.
Last point here before we get you out of here, and this ties with this. And I think one of the things that I love the most about what's going on in golf architecture, my big issue with golf architecture is the cost that we're chasing and what it does to eliminate business models of affordable, limit the amount of golf courses that could get built, opportunities to route. I think the thing I love the most about what's going on right now, I don't think there's ever been better site selection for golf courses. Never in the history of golf have we understood what is a good property for golf. And that is leading to, like, if you start with a great site, the bar is really low, and it's led to maybe the greatest run of really good golf courses being built ever.
And a final point, and it really supports that, is that there's also a willingness today, unlike maybe 20 years ago, to travel to those sites.
Yes. It's easier to travel to them than ever before also, which allows for more remote golf courses than ever. Everybody's...
they don't have to be located anymore near city centers.
Mm-hmm. So that's one of my favorite. Obviously, Google Earth is a huge proponent of that. But like, and then also just knowledge of what makes a great golf site. I don't think there's ever been as much information out there about what makes great golf. Like the understanding of sand being important, the understanding of total fall on a site, what type of contours you're looking for. It's never been easier to find great sites for golf.
Right.
So, Bob, I will let you go. You've got a very important USGA history committee meeting. So I don't want to get in the way of that. I don't want to get in the way of that. But thank you so much for coming on. And people can find you. You're on Twitter. You're on Golf Club Atlas. You're all over the place.
I'm all over the place. Really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fried Egg Golf Podcast. Big thanks to PJ Clark for editing and producing this episode. We've been on a pod bender between the Shotgun Start Year in Review and the end of the year with this podcast. Me and him have been logging a lot of hours together. Thank you to PJ. Congrats on your Juan Soto Mets signing. That's big for you. I know it's going to carry you through this pod binge of editing. A great gift for the holidays is Club TFE. It is our membership. We have events going live tomorrow. I think the Mid-Ocean event is live tomorrow. As a Club TFE member, you get early access to these events. So if you want to play in that, sign up and you get 24-hour jump on everybody. I don't know if it'll be sold out by the time that 24 hours is over, but that's an awesome event that you could get access to. We have a lot of other really great events that are coming down. Not to mention, we have a ton of content in there. I just wrote a Sedge Valley profile. I think we have another Doak course going up this week, and I think I'll have Mammoth Dunes up the next week, I believe. So lots of content in there. We put a ton of time in that. If you're interested in that, go to thefriedegg.com/membership. We'll be back later this week with a couple interviews in an episode. We got Todd Dempsey and Chris Millard. So a little persimmon golf and a little Pebble Beach history chatter on the pod for Thursday. Thanks.